Episode number 90, IRONMAN 70.3 Muncie with Jason Tucker. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with my friend Jason Tucker about his recent race experience at IRONMAN Muncie 70.3 in Indiana, where he had a personal record time of 4 hours, 43 minutes, 26 seconds. This race took place on July 14th, 2018, with the temperature being 68 and rising to 90, and the water temperature being a steamy 83 degrees. He's been doing triathlons for 8 years now and is being coached by Zach Rubel with Rubel Triathlon Coaching. Welcome to the show, Jason. I look forward to hearing about your race experience at Muncie.
All right, sounds good. Thanks.
Awesome. So what made you want to do this race, man?
Well, it's my hometown race. I live here in Muncie, Indiana, so it's something that I almost feel obligated to do. So I spend a lot of time training in the area, and it's always nice to be able to sleep in your own bed and get up and do a big race. So I think this was year number 6 that I've done this race. So yeah, it was something I look forward to every year. There was in 2015 after I did Ironman Texas, which used to be in May. Then that was the 1 year since I've been into triathlons that I have not done it. So I'm just kind of taking some time off, and I almost for the rest of the year wished I would have done it. It's just kind of that type of race. It's actually one of the oldest half iron distance races. This was year 39. Ironman bought it in 2011, but before that it was the Muncie Endurathon. So it's a huge community race. It's just exciting to get out there and race it every year.
Wow. So how was your training going into this race?
Pretty good. I did Florida 70.3 back in April, and coming out of winter training, it was a little, I guess I didn't meet, quite the goals or expectations that I had for that. It's another obviously hot race down in Florida. So, and the huge contingency we had for Big Sexy was awesome, and it was a great experience, but, kind of having that bitter taste in my mouth of not quite meeting expectations was motivating me very much to get into this race. So, training had been going well. I wouldn't say, anything groundbreaking, but something that I was extremely proud of is the consistency, almost every day and completing the workouts and so forth that I knew kind of coming into the race, to being healthy and having that consistency would lead to a pretty good day. You never know exactly with weather and so forth, even with doing this race so many times, but you never know what the day's going to turn into. So it turned out to be a pretty solid day.
Good. Now, with your training, what was your longest swim, bike, and runs going into this race?
Training, I guess to start with the swimming, I am somebody that's very fortunate that I grew up a swimmer. I swam all the way up until high school. And then living in Indiana, basketball is king. So just like every other kid in Indiana, I wanted to play basketball. Kind of funny story. My freshman basketball coach actually told me I should have gone back to swimming, because I was a pretty good swimmer, but I didn't listen. So, so there in college and so forth, I didn't continue that swimming, but I have that background. So then when I got into 2011, got into triathlons, and the swimming has come pretty natural for me. So I'll be honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time on my swim training. Maybe twice a week, 3 at the most. And usually it's 25 to maybe 3,000 yards. When I get into Ironman training, a little bit more, but I would say my longest swim was probably 3,000 yards leading up. Bike training was pretty solid. I think that's, in my competitiveness, I think my biking, usually as rankings come out in races, I do pretty well in the swim, pretty well in the run, and biking is competitively, that's where I guess would be my weakness. So I try to focus on that more and, biking 4 or 5 times a day or 4 or 5 times a week. And then, on Saturday, almost every Saturday leading up, it was 3.5 hours of pretty solid work. So, trying to get a little bit more of my endurance, going over the distance and so forth was kind of a little bit more of our focus leading up to this. And then, run training was going well. I doing a lot of 2-hour runs on the weekend again to kind of have that distance, and then a couple 2-3 other runs throughout the week of 30-45 minutes. I guess looking back after this race, I probably could have ran more off of the bike a little bit, but you can always be a couch quarterback after the race and look at, pick your race apart. But I felt pretty confident in my training going up to.
Now, were you doing a lot of bricks in training?
Well, not as, like I said, maybe not as much as I could have. And, a lot of times in the past, I maybe did run off the bike a little more, a few more bricks, but, I definitely at least one good brick a week. If not 2 or 3, were at least a couple shorter, maybe get off and run a mile or 2 after the bike workouts to just keep that, muscle memory going and building off that. But I think moving forward, kind of leading into the rest of the season, maybe incorporating some of those bricks a little more is where our focus will go.
Okay. Now, with your run training, what sessions did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race where you could run at race pace for that long?
Well, I think, my long runs that are typically, on Saturday or Sunday, that's pretty consistently an hour and 45 to 2 hours. I'm not the fastest person in the world, but kind of, what I guess most people kind of consider a tempo run. We're keeping it near the race pace for that extended period, obviously building up over the past few months. But I gained a lot of confidence over the last couple of months in those long runs of knowing that even with this heat that we've had for the last few months is I'd be able to keep it closer to what my race pace, if it was 60 degrees, obviously I'd be able to run a little faster, but I felt very confident that I'd be able to be pretty close to that even in the heat because of the training in the heat with those longer runs. Okay.
Now, were you doing strength training as well?
I'll be honest, I don't a whole lot during the season. I'm very fortunate that I actually work in the recreation field and help operations for our collegiate rec center here. So I have those tools around me all the time. And, during this off season, I did quite a bit, doing a lot of functional fitness classes and stuff, using the resources that I have available to me. But, most of us, that's one of the first things to go as the time constraints come. I tell myself, I know I need to do more of that, and I know I'll get back into it a little more. But that's as the time was being cut, or, the time was getting limited in some of the areas, and that was the first thing to kind of go over the last few months.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at your training, how many hours did your training max out at? What would that look like?
I'm not a huge volume guy, so really kind of my max, especially this year's become a lot more of a half focus. So I think probably the peak was maybe 13, 14 hours with some of the big volume weeks. But, a lot of my weeks are more 10 to 12.
Okay. Now, with this amount of training, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train?
Yeah. I mean, you have those days where it's tough, but that was something. I don't know if it was totally from the motivation of, having a little bit of that bitter taste after Florida, where that was pretty rare, though. I think, like I said, didn't have a ton of, just kind of those total breakout, totally rewarding workouts, but the consistency was there. And that was something that I take great pride in on, even if it's not the best workout in the world of getting it in. Some of those days are those mental toughness days of grinding it out, even when you're not quite feeling it. I hear a lot of people say that, give yourself a shot, at least, start the workout and then, give it 20 minutes. And usually by then, once you're, a few minutes in, then you start to kind of bounce back and, because we really enjoy what we do. And that's something, I think over the years, these past few years, I love to race and I'm a racer, but I like the training. I mean, I love the training aspect. I like having, a couple races, 2-3 races in a year to kind of focus on. But other than that, I just love the lifestyle. I love the training. So yeah, I'd say we all have those days where we just don't want to get out of bed or, life gets in the way, as we say, where it makes it tough, but, being flexible and kind of loving the training is what it's about.
Okay. Now, how much of your training was outside versus inside? I know the Northeast was really hit by that cold front for quite some time this winter. And
yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Well, definitely over the winter, especially this winter, it seemed like almost everything was inside. I've got the trainer set up in the garage and I think that was a lot of, kind of growth and focus over the winter anyways, was focusing on those trainer rides and where you can really get those structured workouts and building, your strength and so forth. So, obviously north of the Mason-Dixon line, other than about maybe 2.5, 3 months, swimming is inside and, we do have some resources here over the summer. We have an outdoor 50-meter pool and, obviously the reservoir where the Muncie race is held, is just southeast town here and can swim out there some, but majority of swim training is inside. Obviously I help operate our 2 pools and, so, most of my training is done here because I can do that, and run training is, predominantly, even though, right down the hall here, I've got 20 treadmills that I walk by 20 times a day. So, I have those tools and during the winter months, absolutely. But I'll be honest, since, probably since Florida. So since April, I don't think I've been on the trainer.
What specific workouts did you do that gave you the confidence to go into this race prepared?
Like I said, my swim training is really just kind of maintaining. I'm not trying to get big gains in my swimming. So, almost all of my swim training is that. And, we've done, throughout the winter and so forth, a little bit, maybe more, quote unquote strength training. I don't know if you've ever heard of drag socks, but, my coaches got me on those.
What are those?
So it's actually, I can't tell you what the brand is and so forth, but like a drag suit,
right?
It's the same concept, but basically it's a long, it almost as long as like your swim fin, but it's a mesh that it's got like a band that you put around your ankles and then they hang off your feet. And, it's miserable. It's 15, 20 seconds, more per 100 wearing those. So, it's kind of a running joke. Actually, I have that for my workout today that I haven't done yet. And when he put it on the workout, it's 20 hundreds and, he put little smiley faces after that. Cause it's kind of the running joke. It's miserable. So some of that kind of stuff, is maybe a little bit where you kind of change it up, but really for the most part, to summarize swim training, it's very much maintaining, especially focusing over the last few months on the bike, especially, a lot of the key workouts on the bike were, on like a 3-hour ride doing, 2, 3, 4, 30-minute kind of, upper zone 4, kind of big efforts. A lot of my, improvements on the bike, I think have come from, doing more of those types of, higher effort intervals for longer periods of time over, trying to hold those efforts, at race pace and so forth. So, I think those were definitely key, leading up to this race. And then, run training, like I said, is a lot of it was, I feel like the run, the long runs, building up to being able to hold those efforts, like Chris McDonald, he really emphasizes that, it's not about who's the fastest. It's not, who can not slow down. So as we get into, these longer races. That's something that I kind of always keep in the back of my mind is having that effort, be able to hold it for as long as possible.
Okay. Now, when you're not training or racing or traveling, what are you doing?
Well, I've got 3 little kids. So, we've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 8-month-old. So, and 3 little boys in the house keeps us very busy. And it's absolutely a blast. But, it's been great in our lives of, my wife's she's a real good runner as well. And I would say with having little kids, and she's really gotten back into it. We're having to work with each other. And, she ran at 5 o'clock this morning, and, I have the flexibility to train a little bit during the day and work my work schedule around that as well. So yeah, I mean, that's with our activity and our family life and our training, it's a lot of fun. So,
right. Does she have a job as well?
Yes. Yeah, she does have a job. She works in the field of behavioral analysis. So she works with kids with autism.
Okay. Now, with her working full-time, you working full-time, 3 kids, how do y'all both manage the work-life balance?
Well, I think it's something, we definitely both agree that, family is our priority, and we have to make adjustments to what we want to do. And, it's a personal challenge for me. The triathlon world can be a very selfish world. And it's, especially now as my wife has picked up her running again, recovered from our last child being born, that, there's a lot of early mornings, and even us having to balance, who's running in the morning and who's doing that and, all that stuff. So it's just kind of a lot of communication, a lot of, making sacrifices. There's days where, I may have a workout plan, but, it didn't quite work, and you have to adjust, maybe double up the next day or some, there are those days where it just doesn't quite work. But in the big scheme of things, it all does work out. So
right. Now, when did you actually start tapering down for this race?
Really, especially for halves, just 1 week. So, even the weekend before still had the typical 3-hour bike and 45-minute brick run off of it. And then the typical Sunday run was, I think it was about an hour and 20 on the Sunday before. But really the 1 week kind of we figured out that it works pretty well for me. As long as I'm healthy going in, then my body recovers pretty well, so I don't feel like I need a big taper.
Okay. So being that it's just basically a week going into this race, is it like just 2 days off and a lot of easy stuff? What does that look like?
Kind of taper week is pretty normal week of, like I mentioned the weekend before, still the big workouts, but then, just kind of shorter stuff. I think if I remember right, I think I had, a couple 1,000-yard swim on Monday, about an hour bike on Tuesday, then leading in. And then I always do a little something every day. But then I think the Friday, the day before the race is usually pretty much off, or, the typical kind of run through of, I rode around the neighborhood for about 15, 20 minutes to make sure, kind of flipping through the gears, make sure it's more working right than anything. But that's pretty common, where I don't do a whole lot the day before, if anything at all.
Okay. Now, being that you're staying at home for this race, you don't have to worry about traveling or any of that stuff, which is great. And this is a Saturday race versus a Sunday race, and check-in is on Friday. How was the check-in process for you?
I mean, pretty smooth. I obviously, with it being the hometown race, I actually worked in the morning some, and then, about lunchtime went out there. It's about 20 minutes outside of town. So, I'd already had everything ready, and, with the weather this year, there was like a 0% chance of any rain or anything. So I actually decided to drop my bike this time. Most years I'll wait till the morning. Last year there was a huge storm that came in about 5-6 o'clock at night, which was a blessing for a lot of it actually turned into a wetsuit swim, and it dropped the water temperature a couple degrees the night before the race. So, so with the weather being great and everything, then decided to drop my bike. I don't like to spend a lot of time out there, so was able to get right in, check in. I mean, it literally, our volunteers do an absolute great job. I think I was through the tent. I know a lot of the volunteers, they didn't even, give me the typical spiel on the waivers and everything. They just kind of, yeah, you've done this before. So was in and out pretty quick. Obviously I know a lot of people in the area, so ran into some athletes and kind of chatted for a little bit, and then got back out of there and relaxed, and actually was able to come home and take a nap. So
nice. So
that was nice.
Now, did you have a certain meal that you wanted to get in the night before the race? I'm
not too picky. Actually, I used to for years. I mean, I would say it was probably a little bit of superstition. I'm a big pizza guy, so I used to always eat pizza the night before. Over the last couple of years, I've kind of relaxed that, like to have a good meal. There was a group of 4 of us that, some other big sexies that were in town for the race, that we went to Chili's and had some dinner there. We ate at 5:00. So that's something I guess I feel is important, is eating a little earlier and then, getting home and getting some rest. So, enjoyed a good, pretty light meal at Chili's. So
nice. Now then, once you got back home, you laid out the little bit of gear that you had, and then you got ready for bed. What time did you actually get in bed? I'm usually
get to bed pretty early. Our oldest is 4, and we usually put him to bed right at 9:00, and usually my wife and I are in bed about 9:15. So I think it was right about then. I'd say a little after 9. You get the I don't care how many times you do this, you still got the nerves and the butterflies there a little bit. So it was probably a little after 10 or so that I think I actually fell asleep. So
okay. So you wake up on the morning of the race. What time is your alarm set for?
I got up at 4:00. With being a hometown race and being able to sleep in my own bed, and it's 20-25 minutes really to get out there. So I got up at 4:00 and ate my breakfast and drank a little coffee and scooped up my bags and headed out the door about 4:30 to get out there at 5:00.
Okay. What breakfast did you have?
I do just some instant oatmeal and mixed in some just a little bit of Greek yogurt and peanut butter. Kind of add some substance to it and a little bit of extra flavor. But that's the first thing. As soon as I wake up, I throw that in the microwave and get that going, and then I'll eat I had a banana a little bit later on, but that's my breakfast. And I'm a big coffee guy, so got to drink some coffee. So
get things going.
Yep. And then obviously being able to drive out there, it gives me a little more time to kind of enjoy that as well. So.
Okay. Now, what was your mindset going into this race?
I felt very confident that I knew that I could have a pretty good day. Like I said earlier, with it being my hometown race and doing it multiple times, know the course very well. I know over the past few months it's been hot, so I knew kind of overall what my body could handle and how it should respond. So my mindset was just to kind of to go in and give it everything I've got, and kind of if the PR is there, it's there. If not, it's not. But I knew it could be kind of a good day. Once kind of wake up and get going, then usually I'm pretty calm and able to just enjoy the day. It's something that we do all the work ahead of time to kind of go out and celebrate. And the especially nice thing about this race is there's so many locals that are a part of the race, whether they're racing or with the volunteers. A lot of the families and people I've worked with over the years and stuff are out there volunteering. So that's just a fun thing to look forward to. So that's kind of the mindset, is to be competitive and put it all out there, but to also have a lot of fun doing it. So
nice. So did you hit much traffic on the way to the race?
No, it's pretty rural out there, and at 4:00 in the morning, other than the few other, you don't know if people are going home or, from the night out before, or the few other people getting up that early. There's not much traffic until, I would say, as you get right out to the reservoir, the other athletes were on their way there too. So, it can be the parking out there. There's basically one road that leads to the race site. So it can get a little congested. Obviously, being a local, I know how to get around it a little bit. So there's some, the race has its own parking, but then there's some houses along the beach road there opposite, and they provide parking for a fee, obviously. And I've got some friends that live right across the road from transition, so being able to go basically kind of around the backside and get right into that was very nice. So not much traffic.
Okay. Now you get to transition. How's transition setup go for you? Any issues?
No. Like I said, I decided to actually drop my bike the night before. Just kind of one less thing to have to move, even though it's basically right across the street, but just go ahead and have that set up. So, I was able to park right across the street, grab my bike or grab my bag and nutrition and take it over to transition and drop it off. So really setup didn't take very long. I did bring a tent and cooler and chairs and stuff. It's something that's, grown at a lot of these races, and it's been neat to see at this race, especially, how that, the tri club and those tent areas have really blown up. And, I bet there was over 50 tents in the area.
Wow, that's crazy.
This year. That's, not just tri clubs. Also, it's become quite the spectacle a little bit of, it's kind of the place to be. It's right there by the finish line. So kind of that little added setup, but it's well worth it.
Right.
For the day.
Now, in between the time that you leave transition and you head down to the swim start, what were you up to then?
Well, other than just those kind of setting up that in the tent, and like I said, one of my friends lives right there across the street, so some of my other friends were parked there as well. So we just kind of hung out in the driveway and told war stories and joked around, and you'd see a lot of people that we knew and interacting with all the people. The interesting thing is you get, especially in the 70.3 world, you get a lot of first timers. So, a lot of those people were coming in to park there and stuff, and kind of, helping them, point them in the right direction and trying to calm them down and stuff. It makes, that's part of the great thing about these races and these experiences, getting to interact with those people is a lot of fun as well.
Nice. So you get to the swim start. How does the swim go for you? Well,
over the years, this race has always been a wave start. So, before we'd always have, a time when our waves were going off, and it's right there at the beach where they would have, you could get in and get warmed up inside the beach area, a little bit away from where the swim start was. But, I'm not a big, warm up person. I don't need to get in and swim, a bunch of yards or anything. I just maybe get in to kind of feel the water and kind of hang out. But a lot of times I don't. But this year they decided they changed it to the self-seated rolling start that a lot of the races have gone to, which really has worked out pretty well. So knowing that, I felt pretty comfortable with the swim. I got in to just kind of feel the water. Like we were talking about earlier, it's 83.5 degrees. So it was like jumping into soup. So just kind of stepped in the water and then went back. You had to go back around to line up in the basically, the corrals or the areas of they had signs for the different expected time finish. So a buddy and I that train and race together a lot, we kind of found ourselves between the first couple groups where we could just line up and kind of wait for the cannon to go off, and then the race was on. So
okay, so how's the swim go for you?
Pretty good. I like I said before, with the wave starts, and being a pretty confident swimmer, then I wasn't always a huge fan of those. With the wave starts, about every 4 or 5 minutes, if your wave, most of the time the wave would be in the middle or near the back. So about every 4 or 5 minutes, you were catching, some of the slower swimmers from the other wave. So this one, I was looking forward to it being near the front, and obviously the people in front of me should have been faster than me. So really just got in as soon as, took off. They sent off about 5 swimmers at a time. They had a little crowd, set off. And when my time came, I took off and tried to get out on a fast start, try to get the tempo going and get to some clear water as fast as possible. So, and then look to settle in from there. So, really the swim went pretty smooth. I think that start was very beneficial to, there was a couple people kind of got caught behind, that some people maybe got a little overzealous with getting up front, but was able to work around individual people versus kind of catching those packs like in the past year. So swim went pretty smooth. The only challenge to this swim really, because with the reservoir, and then obviously the water was warm, but it's very flat. There's a ton of volunteers out there. It's basically a rectangle. So you just go out, swim across a little bit, and then come back in. On the way back in, you're swimming directly into the sunlight. So a lot of times when you make that turn, that right turn to head back towards the beach, then you're swimming into nothing. You can't see anything. It was a little overcast. So, kind of got some opportunities to find the next buoy and go from there. So really it was, a pretty typical swim, nothing, no records broken, but a good solid swim and smooth, and felt strong coming out of the water. So that's exactly what I was looking for.
Okay. Now then you get to T1. How does T1 go for you?
It's a little bit of a somewhat long transition, obviously with being the beach and the transition areas up across the parking lot and in a big grass area on the road. So a little bit of a, long run, but was able to just, obviously doing it every year, then, it's kind of exciting to have that opportunity. A lot of local people yelling and stuff for you. So that was good. So pretty smooth, was able to get my speed suit off and, get my helmet and shoes on and take the bike right out on the road and go. So everything went to plan.
Okay. Now you get out on the bike ride after you get done with T1. Are you using socks for this ride?
No, I don't wear socks.
Okay.
Just shoes and shoes, helmet, put those on. I actually decided not to wear my sunglasses because when I went to grab them, they were pretty foggy and kind of, I think from the dew from the just the air kind of being humid and so forth, that I decided not to wear those. So just shoes and helmet, and grabbed my bike and went.
Okay. Now you're on the bike. Do you have a certain strategy you want to have for the bike ride?
Yeah, I mean, I do use power. Is kind of the main parameter that I use. I'll be honest, my power meter has kind of been wonky over the last couple of weeks where
really,
having some issues where I think the battery died, but then I couldn't get the cover off. So I was having some issues. So a few days before the race, I actually ended up cutting it off, and I got the battery changed and got it back on. But then the couple rides leading up to the race, the numbers weren't right. They're pretty high. So, which is amazing. Over the few races over the last couple of years, it seems like technology, you have something like that pop up on race day where your power meter.
What kind of power meter is it?
It's a power tap, the C1, the chain ring. So overall, it works pretty well. I think it's something I'll be able to get fixed. It wasn't great timing for that to happen, but I think with the experience I've had, and I feel like I know my body pretty well, I was able to kind of adjust and knew that going in, that it probably wouldn't be a good number to kind of look at. So
you're basically going off of RPE the whole way?
Yeah, really it was just kind of listening to my body and knowing the numbers through training that, based on how I'm feeling with RPE, then this is about where my speed and cadence and all that should be as well. So, I still had all those numbers there, and even the power was able to kind of look at more as knowing that it's off, but I was able to notice that, maybe a little couple spikes, seeing that number spike.
Was it consistently off?
Yes, it was kind of consistently off where, the typical, my zone 2 was more like zone 4. so it may just be a recalibration issue with when kind of messing with it to get that cover off. But I was more afraid of totally breaking the power meter, doing too much than understand that couple rides that it's just high. So
Okay.
it'll get fixed. But knowing the race the way I do, I could go without power at all and know about where I'm at.
Right, because this is a pretty much flat course, right?
Yes, yeah. I think it does end up being about 1,000 feet of elevation change, but it's very flat and fast. There's even for Indiana, very couple little hills, but it's definitely a very flat and fast course, and it's become even faster over the last couple of years because they've freshly paved everything. So because from the race site to it's most of the bike course is out on a state highway. We do 2 loops out there, so it's 7 miles from the transition out to the highway, and then you do 2 laps. But they just freshly paved basically the road leading out to it, so it's flat and fast. Yeah.
Nice. Now, as far as the aid stations go in this bike course, how are they?
Oh, they're great. I can't emphasize enough how great the volunteers and the community support for this race is. Basically with the 2 loops out there, there's just 2 aid stations out there that you hit, kind of opposite caddy corners of the loop. But the volunteers are great. It's a couple of the high school athletic teams are out there, so they got 30, 40 people with the kids and the parents, and they work their tails off to get you everything you need. And being on the highway out there, there's plenty of space for it to kind of spread out and to work around where, just like everybody else, that aid stations can be a little scary sometimes when you get a lot of athletes and trying to get their stuff. So,
Right.
they're great. Yeah.
Good. So as far as the actual bike ride itself, did you see a lot of flats?
No, I don't. One of my good buddies, when I was getting near the end of the second loop to head back in, I saw him on the side of the road, and he's kind of had a history of, he broke a derailleur a couple of years ago and so forth. Yeah, he's had a couple bad breaks for races on stuff like that, mechanicals, but he was on the side of the road, but he come to find out he was actually helping someone else change a flat. That's just the kind of person he is. But I maybe saw 2, maybe 3 total flats out there. It really is. It's a very smooth bike ride.
Wow. Now, as far as the bike ride goes, how do you know how to pace yourself on the bike ride as far as knowing when to push, when not to push, how to make this the fastest bike split that you possibly can, basing it off of RPE versus using power or heart rate or another metric?
Yeah. And like I said before, over the last couple of years and through training and so forth, it's something that I've really tried to work on is kind of being in the moment and really listening to the body. And yes, having those numbers to look at and so forth. But I'm a pretty simple-minded guy where you can tell me what numbers to hold and I'm going to hold it. But really focusing on how my body's responding to that and listening to it and understanding that. So that's why I felt very comfortable kind of basically knowing I'm going to have to go off RP for this race. And, it was something that with the way this course is and having the experience of being flat and doing it multiple times that, I knew that it was more of just being steady. I mean, that was really the main goal on having just a steady effort that there wouldn't really be a need for a lot of, big efforts at any time or so forth, is just trying to kind of hold that pace. And I did kind of I'm not going to lie, I had a time goal of I wanted to be under 230. I've had a couple halves for my bike rides been under 230. So I had that goal, and I knew kind of looking at the splits at the different turns that I was able to do that. So, and was able to stay on pace for that. And obviously I knew that, it was 68 in the morning, but we all knew it was going to be in the 90s, later on by the run. So that was always in the back of my mind that I'm not going to push too hard because I know the run's coming, and the run's probably the most challenging part of this race. So
right.
That steady effort was the kind of the focus.
Okay. Now, with the last few miles on the bike ride, are you doing anything to prepare to start running?
Yeah. I mean, just a lot of it's mental, I knew that, back in April at the Florida 70.3 and coming out of the winter, I was hurting. I think a lot of it was, with being on the trainer, I'd kind of let myself be relaxed and not, work an aero as much as I should have. It can be very easy to relax on the trainer and not really focus on that good position. So I knew, I was having a hard time holding my head up,
Really?
those last few miles of Florida. I think, fatigue was kind of setting in, and the second half of that bike course is pretty tough, a lot more challenging. So I knew that had been a focus too, with kind of leading up, is, really working on being an aero and holding it the whole time, especially as flat as this is. Really, there's not a whole lot of times when you have to get out, other than maybe the turnarounds. So the last few miles, when you come off the highway, it's 7 miles and kind of a couple country roads, and then it winds around. There is one little, kind of a long, false flat, maybe somewhat of a hill leading back up to the beach road. And that was kind of, I use that as an opportunity. I ride out there a lot, and that's kind of a good opportunity to, even though you probably don't need to, kind of got up out of the saddle and rode that hill, just to kind of maybe stretch the legs and that lower back and so forth. And is kind of making that last turn to head towards transition. Then, I shifted down a little bit just to kind of get the legs spinning and just kind of that mindset of smooth finish and ready to run. So
okay, now you get to C2. How does C2 go for you?
It's fat. It went well. So was able to just kind of, you dismount out on the road and kind of run into the grass. So I had gotten some new shoes this year, so a lot of people do the different dismounts and so forth. I kind of laughed because my wife took a picture of me coming in on the bike, and my right leg is kind of lifted up. I kind of made a joke that it looks like I'm a dog peeing on a fire hydrant, where I remember that moment of, I was considering, lifting my leg off to do a running dismount. And I said, I don't want to be that guy and fall. So I just came to a nice, easy stop and got off and ran to my spot and went. Through the big sexy group, there'd been some different discussions on, training in the heat and what people did. And I believe it was Adam Hall that mentioned using a little cooler. So that was something that I tried this year. I usually run, especially in halves and fulls, with a handheld. So I had that handheld and one of those cooling towels in the cooler. So I dropped my bike off, put my shoes on, and grabbed those and went. So, not the fastest transition in the world, but it went pretty smooth.
Wow. Now, as far as the first few miles of the run go, how does that go for you?
It's a pretty easy start to the run. When you leave transition, the course it's an out and back course, just kind of around the south side of the reservoir. It can be a challenging run, but as you first take off, about a quarter mile down the road, you actually go a decent little downhill for a run. So it kind of is very easy to get going a little too fast, but obviously being a race that I've done multiple times and I run out there a lot, know that. So that was kind of my, as I got going in the run, more just kind of to make sure I didn't overexert early. Was kind of the focus, just kind of settle in to a decent pace and kind of start to do that assessment on how I'm feeling and so forth. Now,
did you have a strategy as far as pacing goes for the run?
Yeah, really kind of early on, it was to be at about 7:30 pace with the, like we talked about earlier, those long runs and kind of making an adjustment for the heat because with having pretty good swim and bike, it was still early in the race, but with it being an out and back course and knowing the course, that kind of just go from there. Having a lot of experience on this race and this course, knowing that just kind of go from feel as I got around the backside of the reservoir for the race.
Okay. Now, we didn't really mention your nutrition plan for the bike ride. What did that consist of?
It was, so I like to do the super bottles. So I had 800 calories of, I used the first across glycodurance. So I had 800 calories in that bottle. So that's my main source. And then took in 2 other gels, just kind of spaced out throughout the bike. And then I use another bottle of low calorie, the Hydrodurance, and some Electrodurance to get in those little bit extra calories, and then also the electrolytes that I needed. And, with it being warmer than that day, then I also, I picked up a couple water bottles, but main calories come from the super saturated bottle. So mostly liquid and a little bit of gel.
Okay. Now, as far as the run goes, how does the run go for you overall?
Oh, it went pretty well. I think, and it's been this way for most years that, like I said, with the goal of the training is to not slow down. I was pretty happy with, especially as it started to warm up very quickly. I was able to keep that pretty consistent pace throughout the run. I think most of my splits, other than I think about mile 8 or 9, I had a little bit of a moment or a couple minutes of fatigue and kind of mental lapse a little bit, where I did walk a little more than I wanted to, but was able to kind of snap back out of that and hold. So most of the splits were pretty consistent throughout the race.
Okay. The last mile or so of the run, are you feeling like you're hitting your goals? You obviously know that you're pretty close to your PR, right?
Yeah. I take a peek every once in a while at the overall time. And, that's always a fun experiment to try to do with, you got that race brain going on and trying to do math, but I knew that it would be close. So, and with being this race that, I visualize and have done so many times, that that last mile and a half that comes back towards the finish is it's something I've done 100 and 200 times. So knowing that as soon as I make that turn, that it's just gutted out time and go as hard as I can. So
that's time to go to the hurt locker, basically.
Yeah, the hurt locker. And this is the fun, you ask anybody that's done this race, it can be a challenging run. Obviously the heat, there's not a lot of shade out there and so forth, but right before the finish, about a quarter mile, I mentioned when I started the run, there's a decent little downhill that gets going that you have to watch yourself not pushing. Well, you're having to come back uphill. So it's a nice little spike there to finish to get that heart rate and to suffer. But a lot of the locals and, athletes, that's my favorite area when I finish the race, is to go down to that hill and to cheer on everybody, and tell them to suck it up for this one last hill. Because after you get up the top of that hill, it's basically a downhill off the road to the finish line. So it's pretty fun area.
Okay. Now, the last 800 yards of the run course, you're almost in the finish chute, but not really. How was that feeling for you? Were you pushing as hard as you could go? Were you doing the back math of I'm going to get a PR if I maintain this pace, or I need to really boost it to get a PR? What was it like?
No, I mean, I honestly didn't know. I'll be honest, I didn't know exactly even what my PR was before. This is kind of after the fact, where I figured out that it was 20 seconds. I knew that it was around there. So really, it's just, I don't care if it's a finish, going for a PR, or I knew I was struggling. And, at Florida, I ended up going 5 hours and a couple seconds, and I really had no idea. If I would have known, I probably would have not walked a few seconds earlier in the day to make sure I got under 5 out, something like that. But I don't think, no matter what, I'm going as hard as I can at the finish line, going to the finish line to finish. So whether that's to break a PR or just to get done as soon as you can.
Right. Now, after you cross the finish line, what did you do next?
Well, I kind of stumbled around for a little bit, and my wife and oldest son were out there at the race. And my 2 youngest boys stayed home with my parents with it being so hot. and them being so young, we decided not to have them out there all day for that. So they came over and, kind of chatted with that. And, with being, I keep saying this, but a lot of local friends and people I know were there. And, it's kind of, like I mentioned before too, there's probably 50 tents and a lot of local teams and stuff. So a lot of people just kind of sharing war stories and kind of hung around there for a little bit. And, one of a friend that I started the race with was finishing. I knew he wasn't, I saw the turnaround on the run. He wasn't that far behind me. So kind of hung out and waited for him to finish.
Okay. Now, how was your recovery process?
The rest of the day, I felt pretty good finishing. We really just after congratulating people and talking around for a while, went back to the tent area and just kind of, the other big sexies that were finishing not too long after that, watching them finish and congratulating them. But basically the rest of the afternoon just kind of consisted of mostly sitting under the tent. The food there is, after the race, is great. They do Nelson's chicken, and it's quite a meat, potatoes and a real meal. So that's kind of a fan favorite. And to just relax and try to rehydrate and enjoy the day. So
okay. Now, looking back on it, how well prepared for this race do you think you were?
The motivation coming out of Florida was good. That led into my training being very consistent and so forth. You can always, after the fact, you can look at, should I have done more bricks? Should I have done more speed work? Should I have done this or that? I don't know. I was ready. I was ready to race. And I think that showed more that, that a 27-second PR is huge. But I think the ability not to slow down in the heat, because it did get hot, was something that shows that I was pretty well prepared for this. Good.
What's something that you learned from this race that you'd want to pass on to someone that hasn't done this race before?
I mean, really, the big selling point or point to pass on is to kind of, I would say with the bike, is to pace yourself or control that, because it is very easy. If you really don't control yourself or get too excited or whatever, you can definitely overbike here, because it is very fast. And then the run, any race in the Midwest or most of the country in July has the potential to be very hot. And surprisingly, it can be a very challenging run. So anyone coming to this race, that would kind of be my suggestion, is to, have a plan for your bike and understand that the run can be more challenging than you think coming to Muncie, Indiana, or the Midwest and cornfields. It's definitely a challenge.
Okay. Now, for first-timers that are doing this race next year, what advice would you want to give them?
I mean, other than that same thing of just having that, but most importantly, there could be a lot of things, especially for first-timers, that you worry about. But, if I was to give a suggestion to a first-timer coming to Muncie, is to absolutely soak it in. Because if you ask anybody that's done this race, and, yes, I'm a local, but the volunteers here, and because of that, the history of this race, next year, I think, is going to be absolutely amazing, be year 40, to absolutely soak in the volunteers, because in the whole experience of the race, I don't think there's many at the half world that can really top this of that experience and the people, the community really taking part in it.
Okay. Now, how could Ironman have made your race experience better as an athlete?
I don't know. It's funny you asked that, because I just probably a half hour before we started talking completed the survey. They send out the email afterwards with your time and all that stuff. They sent it out a couple of days ago, but I just completed that survey right before we did that. I give top notch to everything for this race. To give you an example, after the race, and when I was hanging out and a couple other friends finishing, they went to go eat, and we were sitting at the tables by the food area, and they were eating their food, and the race director was bagging up trash and loading it up. And he does the parking. He's out in the middle of the road, directing traffic first thing in the morning and so forth. So that's an example of just really how the community and everybody buys into doing absolutely everything for this. So I don't know. The one suggestion I had is, as we were sitting there, I mentioned how good the food was. The one thing that I was missing, or maybe we just didn't find it, is they usually have ice cream as part of the after food, and we didn't find that. So that was something I was like, man, for as hot as it was, we were craving that ice cream, but I got some later that day. So I really truly don't have a lot of feedback for improving it, because it truly is a great race.
Okay. Now, we covered a lot. Do you have anything else you'd like to add about the race?
No, I mean, I think I've kind of pumped it up quite a bit. I know it's Muncie, Indiana, but I really, even if I didn't live here, I'm a huge proponent of this race for the experience. I think everyone should come race here, because it's an excellent race.
Awesome. Just to start off with, how can athletes follow you?
I am on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and all those. Facebook, Jason Tucker. Some other, I think Instagram is Tri Coach Tucker. I've had that for years. It's kind of interesting. I don't do a lot of coaching or anything, but I used to work with some first timers and so forth. But really, that came about from I used to coach football when I was a teacher and so forth. So everybody called me Coach Tucker. That was my name. So then when I got into triathlons, I was like, oh, that's right. So yeah, Tri Coach Tucker.
Awesome. Now, what's next for you?
So next there is a race down in Indianapolis, which, Muncie is about an hour north of there. The end of this month, it's called Tri-Indy. It's an Olympic distance race. I've never done it. It's kind of a pretty decent sized Olympic race for especially this area, but I'm doing it just for the kind of the experience. And it actually the swim is there's a canal that runs through downtown. So we'll see how that is. So that's next. And then Steelhead, I'm doing the swim. So this will be my first relay for that. So I'm looking forward to being able to just go as hard as I can for a swim and then be done for the day. So that'll be a fun time, and it's not too far for me. So I've done that race a few times, but that'll be fun. And then I'd say my main focus now is New Orleans 70.3. So part of my journey in triathlons is also going to places I haven't been. So New Orleans 70.3, my wife has allowed me to go down and do. So we're going to go down, have some fun, and try out a new race. So nice.
Now, I only have really two more questions for you, and the first one is, what races are on your bucket list?
Bucket list. Obviously, like everybody else, one day I'd like to do Kona. That's obviously, if any bucket list, that one's definitely on there. So hopefully the cards fold or unfold for that someday. Other than that, like I said, part of this world of triathlons, and I'd like to just go do new races. So, Boulder's kind of top on the list of the next one to do at a new place. I really love the long distance and stuff. So eventually I'd like to kind of hit every one of those. I guess if I was to create a bucket list is to do every full distance Ironman.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I only have one question left, and it's the pretty obvious question of, what's your definition of a perfect race?
That's a tough one. Type A triathletes, I would throw myself in there. I don't know if there is such a thing as a perfect race. And I think that's why your podcast is such a great title, because we're all chasing that perfect race, but I don't know if we can ever reach it. So, I think, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think just having a race. I mean, I think most races be as close to as perfect as if we lay it all out there, then that's pretty close to as perfect as we can get, because like this race, Muncie, I've done it 6 times, and every time is different, even though the course is the same almost every time. Every time is going to be different. So,
well, Jason, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed hearing about your race experience at Muncie. I look forward to following you in the future, and I would love to have you back on after New Orleans.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on and for doing this for all of us athletes, because you know as well as I do that we are definitely learning and stealing ideas from each other. So this is a great platform to have.
Awesome. Well, you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
All right. Thanks, Terry.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.